All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. How's the conference so far? Sweet, sweet. All right, so we're going to be talking about what I call the 7 deadly sins of management. So I just kind of want to get a feel for the room. How many of you are in management roles right now? Okay, a fair amount. How many people are looking to get into a management role? Okay. How many managers wish they could go back to writing code? Every time I look at my GitHub profile, it makes me sad because it's just blank. And so finally updated and said, I used to write code and then I became a manager, sad face. I do love management though. I really love leading people. I love leading engineers. I love leading engineering managers. So I'm being very tongue-in-cheek here with my smack talk on management. It is something I enjoy and I do feel like I bring a lot to the table at. So anyway, if you don't know me, my name is Jennifer. And I've worked in software for over 15 years, and I've had a lot of really, really, really bad managers. I've worked for sociopaths, I've worked for narcissists, I've worked for well-meaning, shitty managers, just really everything across the board. And you know what? They are honestly the ones that have probably shaped my management journey the most. They are probably the ones I have learned the most from. Because every time I walked away from a situation like that, I was like, I do not want to be like that person. I am going to model my behavior and my energy in the things I do and the way I approach situations because I never want somebody working underneath me to have an experience like I had when I was reporting to that manager. I am currently the VP of Front-End Engineering at Bitovi, which is a consultancy. So I spend a lot of time managing consulting engineers, which is a very meta level of management where I have to send them into chaotic, crazy client situations where we don't have a lot of control over and help them not only be exceptional engineers, but be exceptional consultants as well without having any ability to control the scenarios that they're walking into. When I did write code, my claim to fame was in Angular, so I am an Angular GDE, spent a lot of time, but I've been writing JavaScript since, pre-jQuery days. I founded a nonprofit, so I've got a lot of leadership experience that I pull from there, and I spend a good amount of time speaking at conferences. I get a lot of joy from helping educate other people, hear about the struggles that they're having, and help them reach and achieve their goals. So thank you very much, Stir Trek, for having me this year. It's my first time. I've been wanting to make it for a while. You can follow me at jenniferwadella.com on Blue Sky, and there's also my LinkedIn QR code. A little sad that engineers, we've had to start using LinkedIn for networking and socialization purposes instead, but I'm getting on board with it. But that is how to stay connected to me. Okay. In Roman Catholic theology, if you are not aware, if you were not raised Catholic like I was, the 7 deadly sins are vices that spur further immoral behavior. And this is a big thing. It's talked about a lot in Catholicism. Not that I'm practicing or religious. This is not a religious talk at all. This is just a fun theme to explore. But I wanted to give you that little bit of background. So for the purposes of this talk, the 7 deadly sins are behaviors in management, often unintended, that lead to poor leadership, unhappy, disillusioned, unproductive teams. And here's the thing about sins, is nobody wakes up on a Tuesday and they're like, I'm feeling super sinful today. What am I going to do? What bad behavior am I going to go perpetuate? No, that's not how, well, unless you're on the sociopathic end of things, that's not how most people behave. And so the point with this sin talk is these are things that we often don't realize are bad or that can be damaging or counterproductive to our teams. So by calling out these behaviors, by calling out these attributes and different things, I want to bring your awareness to something that you might not even be understanding that you're doing. And so hopefully by recognizing if you are repeating any of these deadly management sins, that you're going to recognize that and then be able to counteract that behavior. So the other theme for this talk is kind of focusing on what not to do, which I feel like is kind of a backwards approach to what we normally take with learning things. But in management, you are always going to manage a different team, different dynamics. Management is, well, it depends epitomized, because there are so many different situations that not one simple guide is going to get you through everything. There are a lot of great resources out there on what to do that I'm going to provide to you, but I sometimes feel like, especially earlier in your management journey, instead of getting overwhelmed by the possibilities of things you should be doing, if you can focus on a more narrow list of what you should not do, you can kind of find your footing as a manager and as a leader without creating these problems for yourself down the line by committing some of these deadly management sins. I like the idea of using this quote, this another religious association, but do unto others what you would want done unto you. This is a very common one, but it's also a very problematic one. This is what led to colonialism and enslaving people and converting them to our religions as white people, because we're like, oh, well, if I didn't know any better, I would want somebody to convert me to my religion. Well, that's really oppressive and not really the way we want to approach things. So instead, I encourage you to adopt this model, which is do not do unto others what you would not want done unto you. You have your value system. You have your beliefs. You don't want those forced upon you by somebody else. You don't want somebody, telling you exactly how you should be doing things because their way is the only right way. And so I really like this phrase for that reason, is kind of thinking about, all right, if I were in this situation, like how would I not want to be treated, and emulating that as a leader. Okay, so without further ado, we are going to delve into the first of our deadly management sins. You may have heard a quote like this. Maybe you've heard yourself say it before when talking about hiring. We really focus on culture fit. We hire people that we'd like to have a beer with. Sounds innocent enough, right? Doesn't sound too terrible. Yeah, I want to enjoy my coworkers, right? That sounds great. But in reality, what this does is lead to homophily. And this is a tendency, and if you haven't heard this word before, it's the tendency to form strong social connections with people that share your defining characteristics. It could be age, gender, ethnicity, status, personal beliefs. So this is the first deadly sin of management. Finding common ground is good, and it's something natural. It's something we do as human beings. We look to find people like ourselves. We look to connect with them. And that's totally fine and not harmful at all. However, when you move into a management context, and if this becomes a huge undercurrent in your organization where we're really jiving on how similar we are in all these facets, you can create a feeling of lack of inclusivity because some people who don't fit that mold will not feel a part of the system. So too much emphasis on this common ground can lead to exclusion. I'm going to share stories with you about some of my less than savory managers I've had in my career. One of the stronger ones on the narcissistic scale really loved when people fit a certain mold when she hired them. She liked people playing musical instruments. Not that it had any relevance to the job, but was really excited about that, or really excited about people that were into fitness. And this was something that got talked about a lot at the company level. Oh, we all do this. Oh, we all do that. But if you weren't a person that did that, it was very isolating. The other part of the problem here was this was somebody who did not like to be disagreed with. And so in order to survive in that culture, you had to fit the mold exactly. You had to agree with everything the CEO said. And that led to a really problematic culture where people did not feel comfortable speaking up. One of the other things that can seem really not that harmful is when we talk about companies as families, or we might have a team meeting called a family gathering. The idea of, families sticking together, it sounds really good, but in reality, that creates an environment where employees feel very obligated in pretty unhealthy ways that they shouldn't, because they want to be part of the family. They don't want to be kicked out. They don't want to be outcast. They have to do all these things because they're part of the family. So even phrases like this that encourage that similarity and that togetherness and likeness can actually be really harmful and really damaging, and we may not even realize it. So, big picture here with homophily leading to, of course, homogeny, lack of diversity. And I don't mean skin color or anything like that. I mean lack of diversity of thought. If you have a culture that spends all its time praising people for thinking the same, nobody's going to try and think different. You are going to stifle innovation. People are not going to bring good ideas to the table. They're not going to try things. They're not going to be able to be creative. This is also going to be a very, very strong way to degrade any psychological safety that exists inside of that team, because people feel like they have to be in this box. If they're not in this box, they have to pretend or try and squish themselves into this box. And it can lead to really, really bad team dynamics. So instead of homophily, I'm going to encourage you to adopt heterophily, which is kind of embracing the different, embracing variants of ideas and things like that. So ways to avoid homophily in your teams is, number one, has anybody heard of the term hiring for culture add? Okay, couple hands in here. All right. This is the term that we've started to adopt in the industry over culture fit, because culture fit was, again, towards that, hey, somebody I'd like to drink a beer with ideology, somebody who's going to fit in well with our team, who's going to work together well with us. But again, that leads to a lot of sameness. So we have started talking about hiring for culture add. Who are people who are going to add to our culture, who are going to elevate us, who are going to diversify us, who are going to bring more interesting things to the mix than we already have. So I'd encourage you, if you are in the position to be hiring or in charge of people making these kind of decisions, to start having these conversations. Hey, how do we move away from just culture fit and instead talk about culture add? Like, how would we like this team to grow in that kind of way? It's also important to encourage development of unique skills and viewpoints. And this is really hard to do if you have not already cultivated an environment of psychological safety, where people feel free to have conflict, where they feel free to state a different opinion or a different thought or a different pattern. So you need to be really conscious about curating an environment for that, and that way people can bring forward their unique skills and viewpoints. Engineers love to argue. Sometimes they love to bike shed. That's not necessarily a bad thing, as long as you're creating an environment for those people to express those differing opinions. Coming from the Angular world, I've been writing TypeScript for a long time. There are some front-end engineers at my team that will just hate TypeScript. They hate it, they hate it, they hate it, they hate it. I don't agree with that, but I definitely don't shut down their opinion, because I want them feeling free to kind of express, hey, this is why I don't like this. This is why I have a problem with this technology, because it allows them to feel okay about themselves, but also educate others on different viewpoints. Along those same lines, one of the other ways we can avoid homophily is by not just listening to the loudest voices. There are some people that they're always the first to chime in discussions, they're leading the charge, and there are some people that kind of sit back and are quiet. Those quiet people don't necessarily not have anything to contribute. They might just not have the emotional spoons to sit there and duke it out with the loudest voices in the room to get their thought across. So it's your job as a leader and as a manager to figure out ways to give space for those smaller voices in the room. What are different ways or approaches you can facilitate to make sure those quieter voices that aren't speaking up are able to bring their ideas to the table? I really like lean coffee, if anybody has heard of that model for conversations. And I like the model because, and if you're not familiar, it's you're trying to come up with discussion topics. And so people will take some time, write their thoughts on Post-it notes, and then you go around the circle, everybody gets to share their Post-it note, and then whichever topics get the most voted on or have the most Post-it notes becomes the discussion. But this is a really useful technique of having everybody stay silent and write things down and then discuss them in a round table, because it opens that space for those quieter voices in the room that are going to be less inclined to just, be shouting it out over Zoom or Google Meets. Again, I want to say that, we as humans, we naturally gravitate towards people like ourselves. It's something we do. We like to feel accepted. We like to feel understood. So I don't want to completely damn that. But in management, again, you need to be conscious about this and about the things that can happen. So when you were talking about likeness, when you were talking about commonalities, this is something to be very, very conscious and pragmatic in the way you approach. More Angular stories. So I don't know, 3 years ago at this point, the Angular team started talking about introducing a different architectural concept. And they were talking about it. They weren't going to deprecate anything. But I had some team members that were die hard, into this new way. And then some that were just nope, I want the old way. I don't care about, standalone components, give me my modules all day long. And so we did a lot of things to spark a friendly debate around this. When the team went to NGConf that year, I had got them t-shirts, and they could pick team standalone components or team NG modules, and they had fun t-shirts to wear around and kind of battle. And then we went to a bar and had a throwdown debate. So there are a lot of fun ways that you can, when you're really focusing on differing opinions and dissenting, finding ways to let people express their opinions and do it in a fun and constructive way. And that goes right along the same lines of finding ways to celebrate diverse attributes. It's very easy to praise somebody, be like, oh, so-and-so did this, that's part of this like ingrained piece of our culture. But instead, I would encourage you to shift your focus to what are those unique things? What are those very different things that that one person is the only person who can bring to the table, and finding ways to call out and celebrate that. Okay. Time for the next deadly sin. Has anybody, especially newer engineering managers, found themselves saying something like this before? Yeah, it's hard. It's hard not to. So the next deadly sin is what I call delegation aversion. And this is the reluctance or unwillingness to delegate tasks, responsibility, or authority to others. This is one of the hardest things I feel like managers, especially engineering managers, have to learn how to do. We're getting better about this as an industry, but we have had a habit for a very long time of, when it comes to promoting leadership, we promote the smartest person on the team, the best engineer on the team. And those skills, those excellent engineering skills, do not always equate well to management. And so you've got this rock star engineer, and she can knock out tasks faster than anybody else. It's going to be really, really hard for her to take those tasks, put them on somebody else, and watch them do them slower than she feels like she could do. So that can lead to a lot of delegation aversion. And delegation is scary. Delegating to people means you lose control over the outcomes. Your hands are not directly on it. And that is a very, very, very uncomfortable feeling for a lot of people. So I want to acknowledge this. Like, if this is something that you're struggling with, you have delegation aversion, like, I get it. There's a reason for that. It's a scary loss of control. But as scary as it is, it leads to a lot of problems. Number one is going to be bottlenecks, right? If you are putting this kind of work on your shoulders, you cannot scale yourself this way. So you are going to become a significant bottleneck. If you're taking on all the work, you're stifling the growth of your team members. You're not enabling them the chance to learn and grow. You're going to get burnt out because you're doing everything and trying to manage. Your team members are going to get burnt out because deadlines are missed. They're frustrated. They don't know how to help. They don't feel autonomous. You're frustrated because you're overwhelmed. This is going to lead to your team members not being as engaged. They're not going to, come up and say, hey, I want to take on this task. They're just going to kind of sit back and let you drive because that's a lot easier. You're going to hit a pretty significant productivity ceiling. Again, if you, the single person, cannot figure out how to delegate, you are going to completely limit the productivity of your team and prevent any sort of scaling. This is going to lead to poor delivery quality and project failure. Do you want to go on vacation ever? Like, how are you going to go on vacation if your team can't run without you there for a week? What about having a baby? Like, how are you going to leave and like keep a tiny human alive and your team doesn't know what to do without you? So delegation aversion is a very deadly sin for team cultures. So the opposite of delegation aversion then is going to be what I call conscious relegation. So this is taking a look at everything on your plate and figuring out how to consciously relegate it to the members of your team. This doesn't mean just, dropping a pile of crap in their lap and saying, hey, good luck, figure it out. This is taking a conscious approach to get everything delegated and set your team members up for success to execute on. So this, again, is something I feel like a lot of people new to management struggle with, is figuring out how to avoid this delegation aversion. So number one is you need to start focusing on outcomes. Because it's your job to craft that vision for the team and say, hey, this is the North Star. This is where we're trying to get to. So you need to spend your time focusing on defining what that outcome looks like and then empowering your team members to figure out how they are going to get to that outcome. Coupled alongside with this is you need to set clear expectations. If you want something done in a certain way, if there are certain code standards or something, you need to make sure your team members are clear on those expectations, and those expectations are documented somewhere that they can find them readily available. This should not live in your head. So I'm in consulting. So again, we're at the whims of our clients. And I had this client that I could not keep engineers on for more than a year. They hated it. They were miserable because the engineering manager on this project was just, he would not delegate. He wanted to be control of everything. He was a micromanager. And it was really frustrating because I have a team of senior Angular engineers. They're experts. They're very good at what they do. And he would get pissed off when they join the project and a month in, they're not following his code standards. And so our team's like, okay, well, where are your code standards documented? Oh, well, they're in their code base. You just need to look at the code and tell. Well, the code base has changed like 4 or 5 different times, like their preferred coding standards over the last couple of years before we ever joined the project. So like, are you expecting our team members to sit there and like look through every file and pull up the Git log and be like, oh, okay, this must be the pattern that they're referring to now because it's the most recent in the change log? No, that's asinine. But this guy he wouldn't create that documentation. He would get pissed off because the team members weren't meeting his expectations, which he was failing to state and set up. And it was a struggle. And I don't have them as a client anymore because I just couldn't keep consultants on that because they were miserable. He was miserable. Nobody was happy. Because he refused to figure out how to delegate, define outcomes, and set his teams up for success. Okay, so back into how to do this effectively. Getting reports, metrics, and tracking in place are going to be really, really important to monitor progress. When you are delegating, you are trusting other people. You are trusting your team. Okay. And, maybe they're young, maybe they're less experienced, maybe they haven't encountered this exact issue that you might have before in your career. You're going to need to give them space to figure it out. But we still have to deliver software at the end of the day. We still have, project managers, product owners to make happy. We've got stakeholders to make happy. So we need to make sure that we're still delivering. And so this is why you really need to put on your project management hat and figure out what you need to do or what visibility you need. So as you're delegating, you can make sure that things are on track and happening. And then if you are able to spot, hey, something isn't happening, a deadline is slipping, you're getting a gut feeling that something is taking longer than it should, then it's on you to step in and try and help course correct as needed. This does not mean step in and take over the work. This means step in, figure out what's going on, and then start guiding the right direction. If you can take that focus and that energy that you would be doing writing the code yourself and start to think about, all right, if I were to help build, other people to have this skill and knowledge, how would I do that? You should be spending a lot of your time filling in any performance gaps on your teams with coaching and training. Your job is to get everything in your head that has made you successful in your career and get that out to the people on your team so they can utilize it and be successful as well. Again, you're going to have to get well-versed in project management. And I don't know a whole lot of software engineers that are like, oh boy, Jira, project management, best day ever. This is, no. But like project management is there to help us ship software. It's there to help give us visibility into whether we're working on is going to happen in the way and on time in the way we want it or not. And a lot of times you're managing a team of engineers, but you're reporting up to somebody who cares about KPIs. They care about deliverables. They care about a feature release or something like that. And you need to be able to communicate to them. And this is also the best way you can have to protect your team, right? Hopefully none of you are the type that's going to sit there and if a deadline gets missed, you're going to point to one of your team members and be like, oh, well, so-and-so took too long in this ticket and that's why, and throw them under the bus. No, your job is to protect your team. And so if you have good project management in place, you can have visibility and show the patterns and give yourself the ability to do that. This is a little bit of a shameless plug for my company. We've built this tool called Jira Status Reports, which allows you to basically put together a Gantt chart. And so if you've ever been in charge of one of those just messy projects where you don't know where to start, really complicated dependencies, and you're just trying to figure stuff out, I tend to default to a Gantt chart, try and figure out how many engineers I'm going to need to accomplish that, what the blockers are, what that roadmap is going to look like. This is a really cool one that integrates with Jira that you can do a lot of custom branding on. And this is how you know I've been in management for a while, is because I spend more time yelling at people about project management than I do about lines of code anymore, because at the end of the day, that's the bigger picture that we need to focus on. on. But anyway, this is a really cool plugin that we have in the marketplace. So if you are in Jira, if you're looking for better visibility or tools into tracking what your team is doing, or if you're dealing with an idiot project manager that doesn't know what they're doing and you're trying to kind of like bridge that gap, I'd recommend you to check out this plugin that we've built. There's a QR code for it there and a discount code if it's something that you think is cool. Yeah. But back to delegation aversion. Delegation, it's the ultimate trust fall, right? Like you were taking this, you're handing it over to somebody else, and you were trusting them to get it across the finish line. But I just want to tell you that, like any fall, doing something crazy like that, the highs are so worth it when you see the success it brings. One thing I've seen time and time again in my career, is I've, set up teams, coached them, led them, and set them loose. The stuff they accomplish is stuff that I never could have dreamed of. And it's such an amazing feeling to have guided a group of people, a team of people to do things beyond your wildest imagination. And that's how innovation happens. And I think that's really special. So if you're kind of thinking about your day, and if you're anything like me, you're probably responding to fires for a good 60% of your day. But if we're looking at the actual task work, you should be dedicating a lot of your time and energy on defining outcomes, thinking about that big picture. What is our team working on? What does that outcome look like? And from there, setting expectations is a big part of it. So if there's a new project kicking off, hey, team, this is my expectations for how I want things executed on, to make sure they're very clear and they know what they're doing. This is a really important step because if you do, when you're starting to monitor progress, see concerns, you need a place to point back to and say, hey, this is where you are. These are where my expectations are. What can we do to bridge that gap to get you where you are expected to be performing? It makes that conversation a lot easier with team members than them kind of being blindsided and saying, oh, well, I didn't know you wanted that. Well, you've wasted everybody's time if that's how things are going. And then very, very little of your time should be spent on actual task execution these days. The caveat I make here is if there are those times where you are doing this in an active servant leadership. And you are simply picking up a task because your team is so overwhelmed that they need the support, that's where that becomes acceptable. I expect my team members to be adults and manage things and do certain things, but if I know they're slammed and there's a crazy client deadline or something like that, I'm going to take some small stuff off their plate, getting a meeting on the calendar, or maybe they have some paperwork that they didn't get to. I might pick that up and take that off them because I know they're swamped, and that's okay. But that, again, is a very conscious thing to do where you're trying to help them out versus refusing to delegate because you don't trust people to get the work done. Moving to our next deadly sin, do exactly as I do. A visual gauge, I think everybody in the audience is probably old enough to know what carbon copying is, but the longer I give talks, the more I realize how I date myself with some of the concepts. So carbon copying is basically making an exact copy using carbon paper if you've never seen one of these before. This is also what the CC is for in an email. If you didn't know that, today you learned. And I feel like carbon copying is a strategy that managers default to a lot without realizing that. They've been successful, they're good at what they do, so they try and create clones. A certain boomer recommended this book to me. I don't know if you've read it. I don't know if you know who Dave Ramsey is. I didn't when I read this book. I know he was a finance guy. I didn't know how sexist he was. But this was me reading this book. The person recommended it to me, so I was trying to get through it. I was trying to, give it a good chance. But reading this whole book, I was holy shit, this is, again, the perfect example of how I never want to manage people. Because Dave is so good at what he does that the only way for people to be successful is to do exactly what he does. And so his entire book is how he has created entree leaders, but only as long as they do exactly what he does in exactly the way he would do it. And it was just mind blowing to me. It was, anyway. So this entire section is basically the antithesis of that book. Because carbon copying leads to a lot of things like unclear expectations. When you're trying to make people do things exactly how you would do, well, they're not inside your brain. They're not going to be able to do that. And this is going to lead to a lot of frustrating boundaries. I do a lot of conference speaking. It's been a really great way for me to learn and grow in my career. I love to help support my team members that want to do conference speaking, but I don't ask them to. It's not something that I'm like, oh, you have to do this to be successful, because that's not going to work for everybody. I've got some team members that are absolutely phenomenal writers that can put out amazing blog content. And so I focus on, hey, let's find your way that you like to communicate. The end goal is for you to be a researched, educated developer that can then coach and set a good example for our clients. But whether you do that by blogging, whether you do that by speaking at conferences, whether you do that by, I don't know, whatever skill, that's up to the team member. I'm not trying to create copies of myself. I'm trying to take team members and get them to the desired outcomes based on their unique skills. With carbon copying, you're going to have, direct report, a mismatch of skills with your direct reports and their outcomes. It's going to be really, really troublesome. It's also going to stifle their talents, because they might be good at something that you're not good at. And if you're trying to get them to do things only the way you do, you're really going to stifle them. And then ultimately, this will lead to really limited and homogeneous teams. So the opposite of carbon copying is what I call custom coaching. So ways to avoid carbon copying are kind of like check your ego at the door. Like, I'm sorry, you are not God's gift to software engineering. There are plenty of ways to be successful. It's your job to figure out how to make your direct reports better in their own way and not in your image. So you need to be focusing on the individual. You need to be focused on helping them find their own talents and different things they bring to the table. It's very easy to be prescriptive, especially as an experienced software engineer. So instead of telling people what to do, I encourage you to guide them to figure out what to do on their own. This means being open to alternate approaches or ways that you might not doing things. And this is another scary one, giving others the chance to explore and fail. Okay, it needs to be safe for them to try things, not do them perfectly, not do them the way you would have done them, and have that room to either fail. And a lot of times they're going to succeed, because just because you weren't successful in doing something a certain way doesn't mean another team member won't be. Next, deadly sin we're moving on to. Has anybody ever given this line to somebody in feedback? No news is good news. Yeah, it happens a lot. And so that leads us to the deadly sin, reticence. And this is being inclined to be silent or uncommunicative in speech. So reticence, when you are not communicating, when you're not giving feedback, this is going to lead to really poor performance on your team. This is also going to lead to your high performers struggling and lacking direction. You're going to have recurring performance concerns. And again, you're going to be stifling your team member growth because you're depriving them of any form of feedback because you're just not doing that or not prioritizing that. My company, we went through a reorg probably about a year ago, and I took on a larger team. So I've been managing a lot of engineers that I didn't hire and that I haven't coached and trained. And a lot of these engineers, if they were on a client project and they didn't get any complaints, they just were told no news is good news. So we had no visibility into those engineers' performances, what their skill levels were, what their consulting skill levels were. And as soon as this reorg happened, and we started kind of looking at some of these engineers that had always been in that no news is good news category that weren't having their performances evaluated, they were really, really struggling the second they went into a different environment. And that's because they were never given feedback. They weren't, and I'm talking positive or negative feedback. Like the things they were doing that were a concern were never called out. The things they were doing well were never called out. And, they cost us a lot of business because we would put them on new client projects and those clients would be unhappy with the work and those clients didn't come back to us. And that was a big failure on my part that I wasn't able to course correct. Quickly enough, I should say. So I would encourage you to remove this phrase, no news is good news, from your vocabulary. So the opposite of reticence here is being forthcoming, being open and willing to give feedback. And this is a hard thing. Giving feedback is hard. It takes a lot of mental and emotional energy, but it's one of the most important things you need to be doing as a manager for your team. You need to get comfortable having uncomfortable conversations. Nobody wants to tell somebody that they're not performing well, that they're not doing a good job. That's not a fun conversation, but it's a necessary one. And it's one you need to have with your team members to help them get to where they need to be. It's also really important that you address situations quickly and thoughtfully. If you've got feedback to give a team member, you're dreading the conversation, you don't want to do it. The further out that time drags from the time of the incident or whatever they're needing feedback on, the harder that conversation is going to be to have and have it be productive. On the flip side, you need to spend just as much time, if not significantly more, focusing on your high performers, okay? Do not just, take your rock stars and your superstars and leave them over here to do whatever. That's not going to help them at all. You need to observe them, call out to them, hey, these are the things that you do really well that you should absolutely continue doing. These are your best people. They're going to help you build a team, and they're going to help you bring your lower performers up to their level. So you need to spend a good amount of time focusing on your high performers. And ultimately, you need to do all this by asking more questions. You need to engage with your team. What are they working on? What are they struggling with? What are they proud of? Like, this information that you pull out from them is how you're going to help them be successful. These are two books that I always recommend that I love. You've probably heard of Radical Candor before. I feel like it went through a big boom a couple years ago. But Thanks for the Feedback is absolutely one of my favorite books. It talks both about giving and receiving feedback, talks about like our human biology behind the way we respond. And I feel like it's one of the best things I've ever read in my career that's helped me be a better manager, because giving feedback is such a critical part of that role. So love those books. Next deadly sin leading into is people who don't want to be the bad guy. And so this is what the sin I would call ingratiation. And so this is acting to gain favor or favorable acceptance through deliberate effort. And so this is basically being conflict avoidant. You want everybody to like you. You don't want to be the bad guy. And this, again, gets really, really problematic. You're going to have team members with poor performance for lack of accountability because you're never calling them on anything. You'll have a lot of unresolved conflict boiling over because you're not addressing it head on. This is going to lead to dissonance on teams. This is going to lead to direct reports being resentful of each other, and they're not going to work together very well. There's not going to be room for growth or improvement. It's going to create bad culture, and it's going to create a lack of trust. So you cannot sit there as a manager and wanting to be well liked on the top of your list. I think you want to be kind and you want to be respected by your team, but that doesn't mean that your motivation should be, I want people to like me, so I'm going to give them whatever they want. That's not how productive teams work. So the opposite then of ingratiation is authenticity, caring about people, figuring out how to communicate that you care about them and doing it in a very authentic way. This means embracing healthy conflict resolution. When people are fighting, when they're arguing, when people are fighting or arguing with you, saying, hey, we have different opinions, we have different points of view, we have different lived experiences. How are we going to work through this? How are we going to listen to each other and bridge that gap? You need to hold team members accountable. If there are team members that are not performing, they're not pulling their weight, other team members are going to see that, and it's going to disintegrate their trust in you. So you need to hold everybody accountable, and that sometimes means removing team members that are not a good fit. You need to own your words and your decisions and your actions and not place blame. Like, you're in charge here, you are making these decisions. You can't, blame somebody else because they told you to do this thing. These are your actions, and you need to be responsible for them. Sorry, I know we're running a little short on time, so I'm kind of blowing through these last couple ones. Next deadly sin, if you have ever received this, they're probably sent ice through your veins. I hope that you have never sent this, but the zero context, hey, can you hop on a call, will make anybody think, am I getting fired? This is how it happens. I understand that, it's easy as a manager to forget about this because you might be practicing the sin of self-absorption. And that's preoccupation with one's own emotions, interests, or situations. You're so up in your head dealing with whatever you have going on that you forget about the team that you're managing. So this is going to lead to poor communication on your part. Again, unstated expectations because you're so focused on what matters to you and not what matters to your team. Unnecessary stress for team members when they don't know exactly what you're talking about. Bad delivery outcomes, bad feelings, and team members feeling out of the loop. Software engineers are very smart creatures. They are independent, they are very autonomous, and they like to be treated as such. And when you do not communicate with them accordingly, it creates a lot of problems. So the opposite here with self-absorption is consideration. So I'm encouraging you to kind of get out of your own headspace and consider others and what they're going through. So number one here is always thinking about your audience and making sure you're not putting your emotions into the feedback you're giving them. This is a really easy one that I feel like creates a lot of problems that people forget about, is focusing on the order flow of information. People like to be told what's going on. If they hear it through the grapevine, it's going to disintegrate their trust in them. It's going to lead them to feeling like they are not autonomous because they are just not kept in the loop, and it's really, really problematic. And then also by remembering power structure dynamics. It doesn't matter how open you are, how friendly you are, there are power structures that are in place. You are in charge of people's livelihoods, and you need to keep that in mind when you're trying to figure out how to interact with them and figuring out if they feel comfortable disclosing things to you or not. So some reflections to practice to help you stay out of the self-absorption sin is, does my team have the same information I have to operate on? Do they know all the things I know to make their decisions? What daily tasks are they focused on versus mine? Do they have different priorities daily than mine? Yes, they do. They're shipping code. You are helping manage the team. How might my team members interpret my words? If I say this, how is that going to be received? When I put something out to my team members, is it easy enough for a busy team member who's, trying to push features out the door to read and retain? And if it's really important, am I making sure things are documented and available somewhere that they can go back to? Or am I just pasting a message in Slack, assuming they're going to see it before it goes past the fold, and then get pissed off that they didn't do this random thing in Slack that they didn't even miss because it got drowned by a million other messages? Okay, so really be thinking about communicating to your audience. And then the final sin, if you've ever kind of had this, why didn't you do this thing the way I wanted? That final sin is pride. That your way is the best way. You know everything. And this is going to lead to poor communication. This is going to lead to unstated expectations. No autonomy for team members. Without that autonomy, you don't get any innovation or ideas. And this is ultimately how micromanaging happens. I don't think anybody wakes up and says, ooh, I want to micromanage today. This is a product of these sins manifesting, and it comes out in a way of micromanaging team members because you don't have visibility into what's going on. You're trying to report accordingly, and then it's causing you to kind of put pressure on them from that micromanagement standpoint. So with the opposite of pride, we want to practice humility. Some of the ways to avoid pride are creating a shared vision for your team, giving them something to align against that they can work towards autonomously. This also includes creating infrastructure for the team members to execute within. Maybe there are practices or certain code standards or something. You need to have that infrastructure in place for them to refer to execute within. Spend time learning from your peers. Management is lonely at the top, so I really encourage you to build your peer group of other managers. People in this room are a great example. Like, find somebody at lunch and say, hey, what are you struggling with lately? Listen to your direct reports and learn from your direct reports. Okay, because they're the ones in the trenches. They're the ones doing the daily tasks. And so they are your best visibility into what's actually going on, what actually is important, what actually matters. And from there, you're going to be able to focus more on the success of your direct reports, and then also making it safe for those people to take risks. So here's our recap of our deadly sins that we just talked to. So I kind of started with the least deadly sin at the bottom and worked our way up. So we talked about homophily and how problematic that is. So your responsibility is to find ways to encourage and foster diversity of thought. To avoid delegation aversion, it's spending time on defining outcomes, setting expectations, and monitoring progress. With carbon copying, to avoid that, you want to focus on individual talents and find ways to cultivate them, not just try and make everybody be like you. With reticence, get comfortable giving feedback. It's hard, but it's one of the most important things you need to figure out how to do. Ingratiation, stop trying to be the nice guy. Approach conflict resolution thoughtfully. Self-absorption, always think, okay, if I were in the shoes of my direct report, how would I receive this? What's going on? What's going on in my world? How can I communicate better with that person? And pride, get over yourself. All right, so want to shout out these books a couple more times. And then another one on this list that I really, really love is First Break All the Rules. This is based on a lot of research done linking basically how good management was to a company's performance and success. This is done based on surveys conducted by Gallup, and just an amazing, insightful book, a lot of really great case studies. It's very data-driven, and I love that as a management resource as well. I don't think we have any, we have 2 minutes maybe for Q&A, but I will post these slides on my LinkedIn profile, so you can scan with that to connect with me, and I'll get those slides posted later today. And then if I'm also going to go eat lunch, and so if we don't want to like line up here, we can go eat lunch and like talk management together if you have any questions. But with that, I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day, you lovely human beings.